I was privileged to be asked to chair this panel on women in engineering. My background, for people who don't know, was the Women in Engineering Committee was one of the first committees that got me involved with PEO, and they haven't seen the last of me, lucky PEO. Anyway, and when I first joined the committee in 1993, I was actually very fortunate to meet both Val Davidson and Monique Frize, who are leaders in the work of women in engineering, and we're extremely fortunate to have them here today. All of the panelists have amazing academic credentials, and they all have their PhDs. They all are leaders in their professions and are amazing women. But it's really what they have done in an ancillary capacity that we're talking about today. And they have shaped the community of women and engineers in Ontario and in Canada, and the engineering community generally. And we're extremely fortunate to have them here today to talk about the issue of women in engineering. The way we're going to break this up is each of our panelists are going to have about 8 minutes to speak. Then we're going to have a brief discussion among the panelists, and then we're going to open the floor to questions. And the way we're going to break it up is Val is going to speak first, and she's going to speak generally about some of the initiatives in the education venue with regard to women in engineering. Monique's going to give an overview, and Wendy's going to give us some thoughts in looking to the future. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a biography of each of our panelists. Val Davidson completed her Bachelor of Engineering in Chemical Engineering from McMaster University, did her MSc in Food Science at the University of Guelph, and then her PhD in Chemical Engineering at U of T. She joined the University of Guelph in 1988 and has established a strong interdisciplinary research program in food and biological engineering with an emphasis on the application of fuzzy mathematics and statistical methods to process control and decision support systems. In 2003, Val was named the NSERC Chair for Women in Science in Engineering for Ontario. And then in 2008, her term was renewed with the sponsorship of Research in Motion as well as NSERC, which does a really nice segue into Monique, who was the first chair of the NSERC Women in Engineering. And when she first took it on, she was for all of Canada. And then she convinced NSERC that we really needed 5 chairs. And then she was the first chair for Ontario. As you can see, Monique has showed incredible leadership for women in engineering, but she also has an amazing pedigree as an electrical engineer. So Monique graduated in electrical engineering and received the Athlone Fellowship and a master's in philosophy and electrical engineering and engineering medicine at Imperial College of Science and Technology in London, in the UK, and a master's of business administration at the University of Moncton, New Brunswick, and a doctorate from Emirates University in Rotterdam. Clearly, I'm monolingual. She also has 5 honorary degrees from various institutions and the Order of Canada. In addition, Monique has recently published a book called The Bold and the Brave, which chronicles from the very early days women in science and engineering. And in regard to that, there's some free IEEE books that include an interview with Monique at the launch of the book, and they're over at the side. Wendy Cukier is the assistant dean at the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University. a professor of information technology management and the founder of the university's Diversity Institute. Wendy was a member of the Ryerson's Women in Engineering Committee and taught a module in equity issues to all first-year engineer students in the early 90s. She has a PhD in management science from York University, an MBA, and an MA from the University of Toronto, and she too has honorary doctorates. In 2000, the University of Toronto named her one of the 1,000 alumni who shaped the century. And if you don't know, Wendy also is involved with the Coalition of Gun Control. And although I haven't met Wendy before today, I felt like I knew her because one of the committee members on our Women in Engineering Committee was also active with Wendy in the Coalition of Gun Control. So I feel connected, although I've never met her. Anyway, in any event, we're going to start. And as I said, Val's going to be our first speaker.
Thank you, Nancy. One of the reasons that I'm speaking primarily on engineering education is that one of the things that happened when I first became a faculty member, I guess it was about 1990, there was a task force on women, a Canadian task force on women in engineering, which Monique chaired, and I had the privilege of being part of that task force, and there was a report written called More Than Just Numbers. And in writing that report, I actually was the sort of editor of the section on engineering and education for women and by women. And as Nancy has indicated, I am currently the NSERC RIM Chair for Women in Science and Engineering. Over the past 7 years that I've been in this position, I've honed my vision for the chair, and I'd like to just give you some brief comments about the work that has been done as part of the chair program, as well as the work that I think we still need to do. My vision is a science, engineering, and technology culture in Ontario that welcomes the contributions of all, that supports the educational and career goals of all, and that benefits from the talents of a diverse group of people. Hence, the chair's mission is to attract, engage, inspire, support, encourage, and ultimately retain women as students and professionals in science, engineering, and information technology. Now, if we're going to accomplish this mission in the area of engineering, we have to strengthen the quality of our connections with our audiences. The information that we provide about the content of programs and careers in engineering is important but not sufficient. More women will be truly engaged if we can convey the context, the creativity, excitement, and teamwork involved in research and innovation, careers that provide opportunities to produce products and processes that improve lives, and finally, real-life examples of women who are successful as professionals and leaders in these fields. In the Chairs program, we believe in starting early because we want to attract the attention of young women in late elementary and secondary school who are at the point of deciding about high school courses as well as post-secondary interests. And a great example of our success with this audience is Go Eng Girl, or Génie les Filles. This year, on October 16th, we expect that up to 800 young women and their parents will experience the 6th annual event focusing on engineering a caring profession. This event is coordinated by the Ontario Network of Women in Engineering, or ONWE, which is a partnership of the 15 schools and faculties of engineering in Ontario. It was initiated and continues to be supported by the chair program. Over its 5-year history, Go Eng Girl has reached over 4,000 girls with the assistance of many allies. And in particular, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the 1,200 undergraduate, graduate students, and alumna who have served as role models at these events. Now, those of you who have been trained as engineers may not realize that for a significant part of our population, engagement in and understanding of science and engineering culture is not the norm. Our classroom survey results that confirm that only about 1/3 of the current population of students indicate that they have any interest in becoming a scientist, but there are no gender differences in these responses. Unfortunately, the proportion of young women in high school who indicate they have no interest in engineering is high, almost 50%. However, the percentage that are indicating not sure is almost as high, so I do have I'm still optimistic about our potential to influence. The scope of our challenge is societal. Even those with a burgeoning interest in science and engineering will find it hard to sustain their engagement without positive support from their peers, their parents, and the images and the opinions they gather from society. Change in social attitudes is painfully slow. We can celebrate the success of the social networking campaign behind the voting of computer engineer Barbie. Now, I certainly cast my vote in favor of the computer engineer career and forwarded this link to others to vote on. But since Mattel announced this decision a few months ago, the social networks are still buzzing because it's a controversial decision. And I realize that not everybody's in favor of this model, but the reality is that young girls form dreams and ideas about their futures as they play together with their Barbie dolls. Now, the Mattel designers have created computer engineer Barbie wearing a binary code pattern tee, equipped with all the latest gadgets, including a smartphone, Bluetooth headset, and a pink laptop. Now, certainly, I think even if you don't like that model, computer engineer Barbie has the potential to dispel some unfair preconceptions about computer science and engineering and to inspire a new generation of girls to explore these fields. Another audience that we want to encourage are undergraduate and graduate students who are engaged in engineering programs at universities. What we have learned that when contemplating their careers in engineering, these students benefit from support in two key areas: their perception of their own competencies across a complete set of professional skills, and a full awareness of the range of opportunities and pathways to success. For example, we have developed a workshop we call Academic Boot Camp to help PhD students and postdocs plan for an academic career, and this is an important part of the work that we do to try and encourage to see more women in faculty positions. And boot camp participants have clearly appreciated the practical advice from faculty and administrators who lead the discussions and help provide advice from the trenches. But this model could easily be extended to other career paths outside of academic areas. The network of regional chairs has conducted a national survey of graduate students in science and engineering, and the survey has helped us to assess graduate student experiences in terms of climate and support, as well as to identify relationships between these experiences and future intentions. For both women and men, it is clear that advisor support is a significant influence, strongly correlated to self-efficacy and confidence in obtaining a career in their field of study. So what we need to do is make advisors aware of these findings and the benefits of providing positive supports for their students. Now, I realize that many of the elements of the work that I've just outlined were actually suggested in the report more than just numbers. And when I look back at those chapters on the education, I see many recommendations that are still valid today. We need to work with teachers and parents to make sure that they are aware of the changes in engineering programs and that they are not promoting negative stereotypes. Role models and mentors do make a difference. We need to continue work on creating positive educational climates as long as women remain a minority in engineering programs. So why are we moving forward at such a slow pace? As you can see, this is not work that can be done by any one individual. It takes a network and allies from many layers of the education system to keep it moving forward. And certainly the NSERC chairs for Women in Science and Engineering is an important program. Unfortunately, it's a term that is 5 years, and then there's a change and quite often a gap. So, as I said, I'm optimistic about the progress we're making. I'm particularly interested in hearing from, when we do open up for general discussion, I'm interested in hearing from the students who are in today's audience, and I'll now turn it over to Monique to talk about her perspective. So the slides.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the green
Send
is,
us the green.
yeah, green forward. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm overwhelmed. I didn't expect this surprise, so I want to thank all my colleagues who did this. And I'm going to be very proud to change my cards when I get home on Monday. So in the meantime, I just want to say, after Valerie, and she was a very excellent member of the Committee on Women in Engineering, do you remember in the early 1990s the Barbie that said math is tough? So I think it's about time that we get a computer engineer Barbie. So just maybe to counter. Too bad I didn't buy one because it'd be worth a lot of money today. The other one, yes, as an example of things not to do. So I'd like to talk to you today about this aspect of the report that talks about the associations, because you know, and Dr. Patrice said this morning some very important things that are also in my book on what can engineering schools do about curriculum and teaching style. That is so important. And we're not going to change diversity in engineering until we also address all those issues. But today I'm going to talk to you, engineers and non-engineers and students, about what can the profession do, because, you know, we've been talking about that 20 years ago, right? The report came out in April 1992. And so here is a little bit of a summary of what our report said. I don't know if I can read this. So we had 4 sections, as you heard about the first 2 sections from Valerie, and we had 29 recommendations in all. And all, as Wendy said in an article in the Policy Engagement Journal of April issue, she cited this report and again mentioned many times that this is valid. We should still, you know, work on doing these things. And, you know, we're talking about 20 years now, 2 decades. So technical societies, IEEE as well, they should learn also from this message. So at the time, we said we should create a committee in each of these organizations that looks at gender issues. Okay, so there might be lots of gender issues. There might not be lots of gender issues depending on the society. But at the same time, it's important to address, are there issues? What are they? And what can we work on in the next couple of years? And I always recommend don't work on more than 2-3 things in a 1-year program, because you won't get to do anything if it's too big a list. So, so if you have this committee, then you have a discussion, you have a conversation about these issues. So that's very important. Now, when I did this, I know that some associations, which I won't name, said, well, we don't need a committee. And others in Ontario, as you know, Nancy, the first one was created here at PEO. So, and Quebec still has one, and this one has been moved to OCEPP. I remember at the council meeting. And of course, when they moved it to OSPI, 2 minutes later, I created the diversity committee at PEO, because I thought, you know, then I put a motion across, and I couldn't let that go completely. We had to have discussion about these things. So we also want to encourage and help fund networking events for women. And I know that they've supported, for example, the Claudette Michaela Sound, and I held the first one in Ottawa, the conference in the autumn, and there's also one in the spring, I believe. Yeah. And so PEO has always been funding this partially, I think, and this is really has been done. So some of the things that we mentioned 20 years ago have been done, but not all of them have been sustained, and many of them have not been done. So we're going to put them back on the board again. So then nominate women for election. Well, now you've seen a woman president, and now you see an incoming one tomorrow. So this is kind of wonderful. And apparently there are 4 provinces and territories who will have women at the meeting tomorrow who are also presidents in their own regions. So that's progress. Also, of course, we also had the goal to have as many women as the proportion of members. Now, just remember, though, that only 25% of women engineers become members of their professional association, and about 50% of men. So we really do have a lot of engineering students who graduate who do not join the profession. So again, so when you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at really a very low percentage of women who join. Well, there must be reasons for that, right? So maybe if we do some of the things from the committee report, maybe we're going to get there with having more of them feel that they belong and that they want to belong. So gender inclusive documents, well, a lot of this has been done. We kept repeating many times, you know, he, okay, look, we're here too, you know, so he, she, and they, if you want to do the plural, it's okay. So that has been, I think, moved quite a bit. And then the Code of Ethics has been done, but Nancy would be here to tell you that she and Peter Hiscock, it took about 8 years or 10 to get that done. So, but it happened. So the positive news is it happened. They were the first. At PEO, it was the first to say that harassment and discrimination were a breach of the Code of Ethics. It was a misconduct. And in fact, the first case, I think, was this engineer in Ottawa, right, Carmash, who actually did gender harassment, insults to Anne Rene, who had to finally leave the construction world, which she loved very much because of this. But then he's still on the PO website that he had to pay $10,000 fine, and he had to do an ethics course, which I was so happy about. I mean, so that he would learn about these things. So the next one was hold gender sensitivity programs. And again, PEO was the first one to develop with the Women's Directorate, with Ann Holmes. Yes. We developed the first kit together with Elsa Saragelli and Nancy, myself, and others. And so this kit was to do gender sensitivity in our engineering schools. I only remember, though, that it was done like once in each place, and that's it. So again, time to resuscitate these slides and these programs, and, you know. 2 minutes? Okay, well, I better hurry then. And then, of course, let me go faster then. So this is the book that, The Bold and the Brave, and to me, this was a talk I gave for the Linda Shaw Memorial for the woman who was murdered, the engineering student from Western. And then I decided to call my book by the same title of my speech. And it's really because I feel women who are engineers are bold and they're brave. And my dream is one day we won't have to be bold and brave to be engineers. So just to tell you a bit that it's cyclical nature. You saw that Dr. Patry showed you 23% back down, and actually in many schools now it's only 12% women, so we're back to 1988 levels. And so this is all because of views of women's abilities over 2,000 years. And in my book I explain through these people's own writings, and it's not a question of period, because in every single era there were men and women for education of women and men and women against. And so it's been really a cyclical pattern. So in contemporary times, we still see this affecting the self-esteem of girls. And just let me go quickly to, and what is the biggest problem today? It's the persisting stereotypes. That's why women are not in engineering. It's the stereotypes. Women become now doctors because they see a lot of role models there, and it's also helping humans. They see the connection. So the masculine culture of science and engineering, and this is a big chapter in my book. You'll see it's still there. I still feel it, even though I've been 40 years an engineer. It's still there, and I'm just coping with it in the sense that I do my thing, but it bothers me. It bothers a lot of women, and I think eventually I really want to have women's contributions and attributes be mingled and integrated with the masculine culture so that we can have more diversity of opinions. And the last chapter of my book is by my husband. It's about Albert Einstein's wife and a couple of other women. He's a real good storyteller, and they're true stories. But just before his, because he keeps saying that his is the best chapter of the book, and I agree. He's the writer, I'm the engineer. And yeah, but the chapter just before is what are the values of feminine attributes that we could have in our profession? And my next book will do a lot more in that sense. My second book is already started in research, and the writing will come over the summer. And it won't take 8 years for the second one. It will take less time. So thank you.
Great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really pleased to be here. I'm not an engineer, so it was very nice that I was allowed in. And I started working in this area. Well, I worked with engineers in my very first job. And until that point, I had graduated with my first master's degree. I thought an engineer was the person in the back of the train, if any of you are old enough to remember the caboose. And that tells you something about the education of girls more than 20 years ago, but I won't tell you how long ago. The second thing was Peter Hiscox was a colleague of mine at Ryerson and starting the Women in Engineering Committee after the murders at Polytechnique. And he invited me in, even though it was not my area of specialty, and they needed someone to teach equity issues to all the first-year engineers. And the harassment and equity coordinator at Ryerson said, "Oh, I'm not going in there." And Peter said, "Wendy does gun control. She'll do anything. Send her." And it's when you talk about cycles, it's really interesting because some of you may have noticed in the paper today, the students of Polytechnique back on Parliament Hill fighting for the gun control legislation 20 years after the Montreal Massacre. And here we are, 20 years after the Montreal Massacre, having the same discussion. The More Than Just Numbers report was brilliant. I do believe most of the recommendations apply today as they did almost 20 years ago. But where we have to really focus our attention is on implementation, is on accountability, and is on tracking where we are. And so my expertise is not in engineering, although I've worked with lots of engineers. It's really on change processes, and that's what I want to focus my attention on. First thing I want to say, I do a lot of work with employers, IBM, Microsoft, and so on. There's no doubt that today the focus is on the business case for diversity. The focus is not so much on equity and equality and human rights, even though that certainly underpins it. There's recognition of the global war for talent, acute shortages in many sectors, the fact that there's increased recognition that diverse teams create more innovative solutions, and of course markets, whether we're talking the GTA or whether we're talking the world, markets are increasingly diverse, and if you don't have a diverse workforce, you can't serve the needs of diverse markets. Somewhere about 20 years ago, they realized, for example, women bought cars too. Do you remember when they had that insight? And so they stopped using us to decorate the advertisements and started pitching to us. I'm not going to go through the numbers because I think you've already heard all about that. I really want to focus on, in my few moments, this notion of an ecological model of change. And what I would say to you, we did an evaluation of 70 women in technology projects over the last 15 years. Lots of activity, lots and lots and lots of activity. Little evaluation and limited sustained change. And I would argue that the reason for that is it's very difficult to sustain change, whether you're talking about the participation of women in engineering or whether you're talking about quitting smoking, whether you're talking about any kind of social or health issues, unless you address individual barriers, organizational, institutional barriers, as well as the societal issues. And the societal issues are things like the Barbies. The organizational issues are the chilly climate for women, and the individual issues are the aspirations of young girls. So I want to talk about each of these in turn. Lots of research on the factors affecting choice. It's interesting to note that surveys of high school students show girls are far less likely to even know what an engineer is. They may not want to be an engineer, they don't even know what an engineer is in many cases. And we also know that girls are far more susceptible to their parents' influence than peers. We also know that because of socialization and other factors, boys are more likely to have an intrinsic interest in technology, play with cars, things like that. And I would argue that that's part of the reason that when the dot-com bust occurred, girls left the profession at a higher rate than boys, right? Because a lot of girls were there because their parents were saying, good career, make lots of money, buy lots of shoes, right? But the boys were there because they liked playing with stuff. So I think we've already heard a bit about some of the barriers in the social environment, and I won't talk about these in great detail, except to think about the contrast between engineering and forensic sciences, for example. Shows like CSI, all of the bones, et cetera, have fueled a tremendous interest in applied sciences around forensics. And interestingly enough, you see a high participation rate of girls. Think about the people who they see on television. Role models are important, and certainly the images in the media, which is something that I'm particularly preoccupied with. So if you're looking at strategies to address the social environment, it's really, really important to think about early education. And I am the mother. How many people here have daughters? And how many people here feel that their images of themselves are very much shaped by what they see in the media? And how many of your daughters have thought potentially about being engineers? A fair number. What you find very often is young women who decide to be engineers because there's someone in their sphere who is an engineer. It can be as simple as that. I'll talk more later about issues around early education. We've heard about pedagogy in universities. All I would say to you, I hope, is there anyone from Ryerson here who will tell on me? all I would say to you, and I say this, I know what I'll say. I'll say business schools are subject to accreditation by something called AACSB in the United States. AACSB asks us to report on our diversity statistics. And guess what that does? I'll leave it to you to draw your own conclusions about the subtext. If we look at organizations, I've worked with lots of them, lots of initiatives to address recruitment and promotion, lots of initiatives to look at work-life balance, etc. And hey, guess what? The issues around work-life balance and parental responsibilities were driven to a certain extent in large organizations like Microsoft and Pratt Whitney and so on by concerns to attract and retain women. The current younger generation, the Gen Ys, or there are too many in the room for me to tell you what I really call them when they're not looking, are very concerned about exactly the same things, whether they're men or women. So a lot of the initiatives were put in place to address the family responsibilities of women around flex time, on-site childcare, et cetera, to make organizations more female-friendly, also make them more attractive places for young people of both genders. And see, some of them are nodding their heads. Not going to talk about any of this. Going to talk about individuals because I think this is one of the things that we really, really have to focus on. They do mandatory standardized testing of kids in grade 3 in Ontario. And kids in grade 3, 7-year-olds, little girls outperform little boys in both math and science, right? You all know this. But when asked, are you good at math? Are you good at science? Little boys are more likely to say yes. And I would argue that that confidence gap is one of the biggest impediments that women face through their careers, whether they become engineers or they don't become engineers. And so I think there's an awful lot of work that can be done to coach and encourage young girls to choose careers because they know they can do it. And that will help encourage girls to choose engineering, but it will also help young women to set their sights higher. The other thing that I think is very important is for all of us, whether we're men or women, to recognize that we have a role to play. And if you understand what the barriers are, you know, and I have colleagues who are focused on systemic barriers. I accept those barriers exist. There's no question, and we have to all work to fight them. At the same time, we have visible examples of success, which should tell you that if we equip individuals to go around, to go under, or to knock down those barriers, they will be successful. And so I think it's important to recognize the barriers, to name them, to work on addressing them, but also to equip young women to overcome them, because they certainly can. And for all of you in the room, it's important to recognize that you have a sphere of influence. You can take responsibility. You can influence the relationships with your vendors, your colleagues, your daughters, your friends. Everyone in this room who's an engineer, male or female, can help reach out and ensure those high school girls are not like me and don't think engineers are the guys in the back of the train. Times are changing, lots of encouraging signs. Lots of companies recognize that the images that they put forward are critically important, and there are lots of organizations that are making progress. And Ursula Franklin, who I love, I think said it best when she said that change comes not through revolution, but through millions of earthworms preparing the soil. Thank you very much.
So the next part of the agenda was if you guys wanted to say things amongst yourself or ask each other any specific questions. Or comments. That would be good too.
Well, I just wanted to add that...
Are the mics on the... Ah.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
There we go. Does that work? Okay. I just wanted to add that I didn't write the book to get rich, because it's not going to happen. I wrote it because I wanted everyone to find something in an action, every man and woman, that would make progress. Because it explains where do the issues come from, and they come from 2,000 years ago and have been perpetuated over eras and centuries. So I would like everybody to choose, when you read the book, if you do read the book, to choose an action so that we can move forward and stop the cycle of regression and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Val?
Just one comment on this issue of, again, it comes back to something that was said this morning about the invisible profession, and in general, our current surveys show that in asking high school students about, what is an engineer, what is a scientist, and what is a technologist, they're very clear on what a scientist is. It's, they take science classes and they see scientists on TV, but there's actually no gender difference. Most genders don't know very much about what engineering is, and the difference in scoring their definitions would be that the females are likely to say they're just not sure, but the males will generally come up with an answer that's incorrect. So it comes back to that confidence again in just making mistakes. But we do have an issue of the awareness of the public about the work that engineers do.
Yes. Thank you. Wendy, did you have some comments too?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it is important to recognize that there are certain very, very, very entrenched beliefs, values, and so on that shape this discussion. I think it's equally important, though, to point to the fact that there are huge cultural differences, and in many cultures, the representation of women in the sciences and engineering and mathematics is much higher than in North American society. And I would actually argue that that points to the fact that our media and our broad societal values play a very important but often unconsidered role. And that's part of the reason why, sort of the bleeding edge in diversity practices in the private sector now, and you'll see this with most of the very large Fortune 500 organizations in the United States, they actually have specific diversity policies. This applies to gender as well as to racialized minorities or other underrepresented groups. Very specific diversity policies, not just within the organization, but in their procurement policies. And some of you who do work in the United States are probably aware of this. That has an impact on change much faster than all the rainbow posters in the world. And so what I would argue to the large organizations who say they're concerned about these things, and frankly to the accreditation bodies that say they're concerned about these things, put your money where your mouth is, because those kinds of initiatives will influence the behavior of the educational institutions, of the SMEs, way more quickly than all of the education efforts in the world. And I think there's good evidence, and we really need fact-based approaches to bringing about change.
Thanks, Wendy. So this is where we're going to open the discussion up to the floor. If people have any questions or comments that they'd like to share with us, there's mics around.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if this is a question or just an observation. I'm an engineer. My name is Michael Day, and I have a daughter who's 8 years old. I have no sons, and I have no idea, other than, I guess, expressing my interest in science and math, as to how I could and can encourage my daughter to keep those doors open by doing math and science, so at least she has the option, in the future if she wants to go that way. And I don't know of any role models in my life that got me into engineering. I just like math and I like technology, and I went there, and none of my family members are in engineering or science. And I just liked it. So I don't have a role model as to how you just make your child like it. I know it's kind of just...
I think they all might like to comment on this.
Well, there are summer camps for the age of your daughter, so all over the country. And Actua is the central body that oversees these summer camps. I don't know where you live, but there are summer camps everywhere. The Go-Eng Girl is for a little older. They're for grades 7, 8, 9, 10. But then in Ottawa, we do Design Tomorrow's World as well, a little later than the Go-Eng Girl, and that's for teachers and girls. And the first one, Go-Eng Girl, was with parent and girls. And the second one is really to build the confidence in the girls in doing something non-traditional, like a design. And so with the teachers, we do grades 10, 11, 12, and 10, I think, and 9. And we found an incredible difference in their attitude afterwards. And they'd say, I didn't know I could do this. So you build not only the interest, but you build the confidence. So there are lots of programs in Canada. Just go on websites and look for summer camps in science, engineering, and all that.
Val?
I think our experience is that there's certainly a range of interests, but certainly lots of the young girls really get excited about computer technologies. We were just, we did a workshop last week where we were basically doing simple robotics with computers, but it was in a very creative context. We basically had them create robots of plants and animals in the rainforest, and we had ways of connecting them to sensors and things that moved, Lego components that would move. So they all got into that. So I think you have to find ways where your daughter will be engaged in these technical areas and see the value of, or find interest in math in ways that excite her and get her imagination. That's going to change as she grows older, and there will be doubtless sometimes when you're very frustrated with trying to guess what it is that's going to grab her. But I think there are, as Monique mentioned, these camps. There are also organizations like the Girl Guides. They run really good programs because there are things like badges, and it's they just run a very good leadership model. So those would be the kinds of things that I would suggest.
I would just add to this. Some of you know Peter Hiscox, and he and his then 12-year-old daughter rewired part of my house. And she's now a master's degree in engineering. And I would say she was an only child of someone who was, you know, an engineer, technology. I was going to use a bad word, so I won't. But I think he played with her. He played with her doing the stuff that he liked to do, and that got her really interested in building stuff, wiring stuff, figuring out how things worked. So as a father, my guess is that's one of the things that you can do to demystify and expose a daughter to the fun. I don't find that stuff fun, but the fun stuff that some of you like to do.
Okay. Okay. You go there.
I was a little bit, my name is Pravin Shah. I'm a retired engineer now. But I was interested in what Wendy said about cultural impact. What I find that the society here is very hardworking, but they have no control on their children because they may have control up till 12 years old. When they become 14, 15, 16, whether they are boys or girls, they become very independent and parents back away. The first cultural shock I got when I came in 74, we bought a house in Niagara Falls, and within a week we heard some neighbor, 6 houses from there, has thrown the kid out of the house, 16-year-old kid. And we never do that in our life, but that's the shock I got. Here, kids have a lot of freedom. 15, 16, the parents have no control. So up till 12 years, 13 years, you have control. So that's a systemic problem there. The other thing is that when we grew up, my children were born here, so when they grow up in Deep River and they did the science and maths, they did differential equation, integration, everything in high school. When we did it in the universities, and I was impressed. Even my daughter was doing so much differential equation, and I was very much impressed with that. Finally, she didn't become an engineer, but she became a pharmacist, but that's okay. She did something. And my son became a software engineer, but the question arises that the society has to have some kind of a stability. In our school, in whatever I noted, even the boys, they don't continue for higher education. My son's friends, school friends, most of them, we always see that, never finish even undergraduate because the society is so comfortable here and they have freedom. And the other background, social background, is that plumbers, and if you are a technician, plumber, carpenters, electrician, you earn more money than even an engineer can earn. This morning that was talked about that our salaries are very low. So people don't have a prospect. And engineering for us is mostly outdoor life. You know, if you're an electrical engineer, you go in the field and, you know, black flies and mosquitoes and everything. Civil engineers, same thing. So that also puts away a lot of difficulties in women. So there's a little bit of a cultural thing there.
Thank you. Next.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. My name is Heba, and I'm a Carleton student. I'm here, one of the 20 students, like female students, that WISE and OCEPP sponsored to actually come and attend this conference. I would like to thank you for that, first of all. And I have a sort of a question or a comment that for here to everyone to reflect upon. When I was looking around this morning, I found that the 20 students, the 20 females, were the ones that you had sponsored to bring here, the younger generation. I'm sorry, that doesn't seem very right. But anyways, my point is, if there wasn't the initiative or the policies, the diversity policies, to actually engage females, do you think that women would actually enter the engineering field? I find, like I was talking to one of the people in IBM, and they have the Extreme Blue program in the summer, and they don't have any females, and they were trying to target females to actually apply and actually go into the program because they have a very, like they had the 100, like the 20 people that were taken last year, they were all male. So do you think that without like these policies, do you think policies or initiatives to actually engage the females, that we would we'd actually have a higher number of females in the field? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, briefly though, you guys. Okay.
Well, no doubt that we have to involve females in all levels, and that's what I mean by integrating feminine perspectives. Otherwise, we're not going to see a big change. So involving them in everything. You know, I'm going to a conference many times, and I see all the keynotes, and guess what? Not a single woman, or maybe one token woman, and still happens in my next conference that I'm going to in Greece now in a few weeks. And so there is a huge issue, and I think that every level has to say, let's find the women who could participate. I'll just tell you a very quick story. John Gerard, when I worked for him in NABST, I was National Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister. John called me. Met me at the airport one day. We just happened to be in the lounge together, and he said, you know, this cross-Canada science, they were asking the public and all the scientists to come and comment on their science policy. And he said, Monique, you know, I received a whole bunch of names, and they were all men. So then I wrote back to everybody, and I said, now you sent me the names of the men. I want you to send me the names of the women. So it shows you again, the women are always invisible. So maybe engineers are invisible, women are doubly invisible. And we disappear from everywhere. And so I think we have to think about ways to profile women, and successful women, ordinary women, because ordinary men make it. So all these things I would like to leave with everyone in the room.
Val?
I'll be really brief. I would say that as long as women are such a minority, and by minority I mean well under, 30% would be sort of a better balance, then I will advocate for initiatives like the WISE OCEPP Award to simply bring women together as you had a chance to work or to meet each other last night, because I think that networking is so important in offsetting the isolation that exists when women are in such low numbers, and that's why I would continue to advocate for it.
Okay. Sorry, did you want to add something, Wendy? Or?
I was just going to say it's funny Val would say 30%, because that's generally regarded as the tipping point. Once you hit 30%, the environment changes, and then generally you don't have to do as much work.
Okay. Oh, you guys are so fair.
Hi, my name is Amy Boughtonhouse. I'm from Queen's University. I was also with Heba last night having dinner with the WISE OCEPP Award. I just want to first quickly thank Val for asking for the thoughts of younger students here, and I just want to say that I respect your interest in the computer engineering Barbie. I think that's a funny thing, but for me, my understanding and my interest in feminism is different than that, and I would not fall in the camp of supporting computer engineer Barbie. I think Barbie is part of the reason why there are not enough women in engineering, and still why women are underrepresented in many aspects of society. So maybe that's from the younger generation, maybe that's just me, I'm not sure. But my question is asking for comments from Monique, because on your slide you mentioned gender, I can't remember what the word was, but you mentioned ceremonies, and I'm not sure how many people have gone through the Iron Ring ceremony, but in my experience from that, it was very clear to me that the ceremony was written for men, Christian men who were civil engineers, very, very not inclusive of the body of people, the very, very diverse body of people who try to graduate, and that ceremony is supposed to be welcoming you into the working world and is in fact jarring and quite frightening, but also a good indication of the culture that actually exists in the working world. So I was wondering if you have comments on that.
Yes, thank you. I would have mentioned that if I had more than 10 minutes, but in my 12 years as the chair, I definitely looked around the country to see if there were better ways, and I know that in Quebec it's quite different. At Polytechnique and in Laval, they have open meetings, because the doors are barred in other provinces, and it's just engineers can go in. And there it's more open, parents can come, and it's far more, I would say, diverse in its approach. I got my iron ring. I was the first one in Ottawa from your Ottawa University grad, and it was 1,000 men and me, maybe, I don't know how many. But he came, brother, and then didn't know what to say to me, So I said, well, sister, Then we had to go drink some beer and stuff, Yeah, so I would like to see the change, and it's a very, very closed network. But I did talk to some of them, and I think we have to get maybe the young voices. And I'm ready to work on that again because I didn't have time, but it is very important. I agree with you. You want to belong, You're not a son of Martha, right? So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, the iron ring ceremony is just bizarre and archaic. And I'm speaking as a white Anglo-Saxon. It was an alien, frightening experience for me in 1985.
Yeah, that cold irony, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Louis Richard. Been an engineer for many years. I've got a 13-year-old granddaughter that expressed an interest in being in engineering, and one of the things I'd like to comment on is this comment about girls in grade 3 do better in math and science. Don't dispute that comment, but I've also read studies that males are better wired for math and science than females. And I told my granddaughter that she had to be good in math to be an engineer. And she surprised me and said, "Oh, that's not my best subject. I only get 80%. Which made me think that maybe girls are good in math and they may be better than males, but it may not be their best subject, which is why they tend to go to other occupations where their better subjects lead them to. And the other thing we talked about is the interest, getting a general interest in young kids in becoming engineers. And one way to do that is to get them a hero. Young kids want to be policemen, firemen, doctors, because the TV shows are there and they show
Julie
them.
Payette.
The problem with an engineering TV show, considering the time it takes for engineers to do things, no matter what discipline you are, in one season, the person would age 40 years. So it's a challenge to overcome.
I just want to answer that in my book, there's 2009 data, over 1 million kids in the US, and there were no more differences anymore on science and engineering performance. And the girls in Japan do better than the boys in America,
Yeah.
so that's another issue.
And just if I can add to that,
Sure.
40% of students in Ontario majoring in mathematics are women. So I actually don't think math ability is a barrier. I think it's self-efficacy and confidence.
Well, my suggestion is that the girls are better in other subjects as well, which attracts them towards other careers.
Yeah, no, that's true, in reading and health sciences.
I just wanted to.
Sorry. Well, so you first, and then Ingrid. It's Ingrid, right? And then you. Okay.
Okay, sorry. I just want to go back to the question about mentors and strong role models, and I want to tie that into the fact that women are leaving the profession a lot at a higher rate than men leave, and there's a level of disillusionment. And from my personal experience, I can tell you that I've observed an increasing chill towards women in the profession, and I certainly know of female engineers who will happily openly state they would not encourage young girls to go into engineering, and on a good day they'll send them off to the local WISE chapter, and on a bad day they'll go into law or medicine. So the question is, what's being done about the women who are currently in the profession? I'm going to point out that if you look at all the men in this room, almost all of them raise their hands when you ask, do you have a daughter? And the rest of the people here are women, and it's like, okay, so where are all the other men? You've what? Excellent. Yay! One out of all.
But Howard's highly evolved.
The exception that proves the rule. So the question is, what's being done to support the women who are currently in the profession, and B, get the people who don't have a vested self-interest involved in this?
Sure. Pardon? Okay, I can mention that. So the Women in Engineering Advisory Committee at OCEPP is looking at workplace issues. And I think really we're rolling out a survey really in the next couple months to compare men and women's experience in the workplace, but also to help develop maybe some initiatives with regard to retention. But we're going to wait for some of the results in the survey to talk about that. But now that I've got the mic, I'm going to comment a little bit. My background, which I didn't really share with you guys, is that I'm both an engineer and a lawyer. And I find it interesting with some of the discussion about the chill and the differences. And there was a very interesting study by Bertha Wilson looking at law and female lawyers in the profession. And we, in law, had many of the same issues as did women engineers. And I personally think that some of the issues that women engineers face is really about educated women in professions in our society. And back to some of the things that Monique and really all our speakers were speaking to, which is the role of women in our society, talking about having the confidence to be everything that you can be. And I think that, you know, there are opportunities really for us in the women in engineering community to work with other professional women to address some of these issues. Wendy?
Yeah, I think we did a survey of 17,000 middle managers, and about 8,000 of them worked in big ICT firms, so they weren't just engineers. But a couple of things you'll find is, in general, large firms, not exclusively, but in general, have much better developed human resources policies around recruitment, retention, open and fair promotional policies, support in the workplace, pipeline development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Huge gap with SMEs. And so the experiences that came out around perceptions of workplace fairness and how they were treated and so on, what we saw is, in general, if you worked at a fairly large company, it was more likely your experience was not bad. But if you worked in a small SME in the high-tech sector, there was a much higher likelihood that your experience was not so great. And I would actually argue that, again, the societal piece is important, but they're very specific policies and practices, best practices, well documented, that can go a long way to addressing the chilly climate and to creating fair and inclusive workplaces. And I think companies have to be held accountable.
Okay, we're actually over time, so I'm going to cut it off. You three people have been standing there. 3 more questions, that's it, and then we'll wind up. Okay.
Hi, I'm Leslie Herstein from the University of Toronto. I'm a PhD student in civil engineering. I know that a lot of initiatives have been done out of the classroom, so Go Eng Girl, engineering outreach, summer camps, and I'm just wondering what the initiatives have been to go into the classrooms, because a lot of the people who end up teaching children, and I'm not saying this is someone has to teach children, are, you know, women who have, you know, careers where they can go and look after their children in the summer. So how are you going into classrooms and sort of promoting equity amongst young women in the classroom?
Val, you want to speak to that?
Well, just a quick answer is that in fact is an issue or an initiative that Research in Motion is quite interested in, and we are actually, as a group, I'm part of the group, but also Perimeter Institute outreach people are involved. We're going into middle schools to actually do workshops for the teachers, because we recognize this issue of not so comfortable with science, and that's exactly where we want to see more sustained change, is to basically, you know, we do a lot of workshops in the classroom, but you know that we're only there once. Right. It's going to be much better if there's more sustained effort, and there are programs like Engineers in the Classroom or an Engineer in Residence that exactly that, engineers going into the classroom.
Good for you.
Just, yes.
Hi, I'm Kim Farwell, president of APEGA. I've got a comment and then I've got a question. And the comment is based on a discussion already on the Iron Ring ceremony. And I just want to clarify, first of all, that Alberta also has an open ceremony. The other thing, though, the ceremony, I've done a lot of historical research into the ceremony. I've been into the archives of the EIC, the Engineering Institute of Canada, to understand more about this ceremony and its history. And it's actually a very beautiful history that's very time-oriented with respect to the language and respect to the history. The Sons of Martha is actually a passage from the Bible, and the incredible poem that Rudyard Kipling wrote, the reasons he is involved in our ceremony, and the history behind that, and how impressed he was with the Canadian engineers during the war that he actually housed in his own home. That aspect of it is something that is so precious to our profession, and it's something only Canadian engineers have. So before we get too excited about the language and how it is inclusive or not inclusive of women, we need to understand the context of that ceremony, the time it was written, and how that is really a gift to a Canadian profession that no one else in the world has. Now, with respect to being inclusive to women, we maybe need to change some of the context around it, but if we choose to change that history, we're going to lose something that is more precious than any other profession has. So that's my comment. My question, though, being in the industry, it is cold to women. And we're trying to recruit women into engineering, but I think we're still paying the price, and I'm going to call it the affirmative action price, where we're still looked at, she got there because she's a girl. And I just wondered what the panel would say about that.
Well, you know, I was asked that many times when I went around the country with the Committee of Women in Engineering, and what I said is, would you rather not get the job because you're a woman? At the same time, I explained, you know, a little further that it's very important that we talk with young men as well, and we were saying that with Jean Inch, remember, with the committee, that it's important to dialogue about what is affirmative action and what is equity, and that it's not taking the jobs away from men, but it's finding, removing the barriers to women. So, you know, when you explain it properly, I think that the dialogue becomes less angry. About the Iron Ring ceremony, I think it's important that the history and the bridge in Quebec, I had their first ring from that, and I think the history can be explained in the ceremony itself, and I think we need to keep that history, I agree with you, but also I think we need to move to a less Christian. A lot of the young students at Queen's told me one day, well, we feel disenfranchised, we don't want to go to the ceremony because, you know, we're not from that religion and we feel totally left out. So I think we need to move to something more modern, but remember the past. I agree with you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Joelle, and I'm also one of the students sponsored to go here, and I'm thankful for this experience. And I guess what I want to say is a comment and a suggestion on the subject of breaking the stereotypes in the school studying engineering and in the profession. Because what I see right now is there are many women ambassadors talking to women students, encouraging them. But I was wondering and hoping if it's possible that there could be some male ambassadors talking to male students to help the environment be more friendly for women. And I'm saying that because I know that men, I talk to my friends a lot, and I know that they believe that we can do what they can do. Even my friends tell me that but because other men still have that stereotype for women, they're not that confident they don't have that confidence to spread that word to other men. So.
I'm going to speak to that. So I was very lucky when I was on WEAC because we had we had actually a few men, two in particular who made an incredible contribution to our committee. One was Peter Hiscox, whose name has come up a number of times, and the other was Tom Roach, who was kind of a behind-your-scenes sort of engineer, but he put together nominations package, because as part of what we did was we nominated women, for the different awards, and he put together successful nomination packages again and again. So we were incredibly lucky to have women on men on our committee who were champions. And the other person in my tenure with WEAC was when we were able to convince PEO Council to change the Act. In my opinion, without the help of some of the presidents who during that period were men, there is no way that act would have been changed. And they were sometimes overtly helpful to us, but in other ways subtly helpful. In that I recall one meeting we were at, if the president had put it to a vote at that meeting, it would have been defeated and we would have had an uphill battle. But he didn't. He said we needed more information. We got a chance to regroup. We got a chance for council and executive to rethink. And when we came back, all the questions were about implementation as opposed to should we do it. And so in some of the initiatives that I've been involved with anyway, we've had men who've been hugely helpful. Val?
And I'll just echo what you're basically saying, that it's leadership that's really important. And in the faculties of engineering, I know the ones in Ontario better than across Canada, but there are clearly some deans and chairs that are taking that, male deans and chairs who are taking that role, and it makes a big difference. But it's basically somebody who's going to show the way by the way that they act and their leadership.
Okay, on that positive note, I'd like to thank all the women on this panel. We've been... and I have gifts for you. I was going to say, I think we've been incredibly lucky because we have, all of these women are both trailblazers and role models for all of us in changing society and within the community of women in engineering. Thank you.